Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending April 15th. We are kicking off the week with Easter. So if you celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful time with that and a wonderful day. And if you don't, well, I hope you have a wonderful day too. I think everybody should have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. We got some fun stuff going on this week, so we're going to go ahead and get right to it. We're going to start, as we always do, with Aries. We're sort of kicking off the week with the Sun and Jupiter in a bit of a conjunction with each other, although they'll be in perfect conjunction with each other by about Tuesday-ish or so. And the closer a conjunction between two planets is a closer proximity to the two of them very much working together with each other to create magic. And this is actually a really good thing. Jupiter is all about growth and expansion. The sun is where you shine. Everything is focused on your career. So if you are building different projects or building towards something new in your career, perhaps a step up in your career, this is a great week for it. I mean, just all the energy is just flowing in that direction for you. And as we move into Monday, the moon moves into a trine with these two planets as they're getting closer and closer and closer to each other. The moon's focus is right on the cusp of those you love and your daily schedule. So I kind of take that to mean that some of those people that you love are helping you towards these particular goals. And it's really interesting, actually. In many cases, you would not necessarily think that, say, your family, for example, would be able to help you to achieve your career goals. But in a sense, there's a million different ways that they can be supportive in some way to you, including helping you to clear up space in your schedule to be able to focus on what you need to focus on. So sometimes it's really the little things when you think about it. As we progress throughout the week, things continue to be, and we get closer and closer to that conjunction. We also do move into a square with Pluto, as in both planets do move into a square with Pluto. Pluto represents your source of personal power. It's all about change and transformation. It's really focused on relationships right now and currently in Aquarius, 0 degrees Aquarius. And Aquarius is just not, when it comes to relationships, it's not that Aquarians are not good at relationships or can't emotionally form relationships. It's not what I'm really saying here. But when you've got Pluto in a planet that's focused on relationships, and yet we're talking about finding our personal power within those relationships, I feel it's really important here that you're focused on your career and you need to make sure that you're focused on the right relationships that are going to be beneficial towards your journey towards this particular goal. And what is interesting about Aquarius being a part of this is Aquarius is not about sentimental or emotional bonds. Aquarius is about forming the bonds that are going to be helpful for this particular goal, not necessarily creating a bunch of besties from here on out. And it's not really what we're looking at. So just make sure that your focus is on building the right type of relationships. If your focus is on that, you should be golden. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to pause for just a minute and be right back with Taurus. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to Taurus. What do we got going on here? We have Uranus we have Uranus in Taurus, obviously. We continue to have Mercury in Taurus as well, and we are moving into the shadow period of that Mercury retrograde right at the end of this week on the 15th. So the official retrograde starts on the 21st. It is a full Taurus retrograde, unfortunately. So while it does affect everybody, it is, of course, going to affect you more than anybody because it is in your sign and it takes on the influence of the sign as well. And we're not quite in conjunction with each other yet. Mercury will be moving into conjunction with Uranus probably next week, right before that retrograde hits. So we've got focus on your support system, those that support you. Uranus is focused on that. Mercury is officially focused on that as well, although he's kind of on the cusp of your career, which brings that sort of influence into it and may even direct us to where you seem to be needing the support currently right now. Uranus is in Mercury is in a sextile with Mars currently, and Mars is still in that really interesting and kind of annoying position of being focused on our inner self, our inner trauma. So of course, this is going to indicate a bit of a release of anger, especially releasing anger towards things that are really, really old patterns, if that makes sense. And we just have to do this release if we want to get past the trauma so that the trauma is not really a fear, turns into a fear that's holding us back. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, maybe, for lack of a better word, but once you get past the process, everything does run a little bit smoother. And to be honest with you, you want to get through this process this week before we move into that shadow period, because once we start to get into that, things get a little bit more complicated, as you well know. Uranus is not lining up with any planets really at all this week, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We've had a lot of difficulty with Uranus lining up in challenges with other planets that lasted like a really long time. So it's nice to just see his influence and his influence only. And I really feel that if a support issue comes up this week, Uranus's influence is very important when it comes to that, because Uranus is a very sort of out of the box, not following the way everybody else does things or even following the way you've always done things, but sort of looking at different forms of support, something that you haven't looked into before. Chances are you're looking for a specific type of support for any kind of challenges that are coming up, specifically around your career. So it's really important that you find the right type of support and not just look for somebody who seems to be supportive all the way around, if that makes sense. So we're not really talking emotional support here. There's little bits of an element to that, but what we're mainly referring to is specific types of support for your business concerns. So it's looking outside of the box and even allowing your intuition to guide you in many ways about that, specifically when it comes to people that your mind would normally say, this is not going to be a supportive person. And we've all met those people where there's like, I know this isn't what I'm looking for. And it turns out that what they can offer you is exactly what you need. So keep your minds and even your hearts in some cases open for that. And that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Gemini. Officially, not Mercury, I'm so sorry. Venus moves into Gemini this week, which is a much, much, much different influence from what Mars has been over the past few months, which of course he's officially gone now. So we're not worried about that anymore. Don't worry. He's not going retrograde again for another couple of years, which is also really good. So we won't be dealing with that anytime soon, but we do have Venus officially moving into your sign on Tuesday. Venus is a very interesting influence for Gemini. Venus brings a lot of creative energy into the mix. Venus also brings a lot of love and specifically challenges around love, depending on where she's pointed and how she's influencing you. We are focused on your support system. And as Venus moves into your sign, she moves into your sign in a grand sextile with Pluto as well as Neptune. So that's actually a really good influence to come into your sign with. Now, I see creative juices flowing, number one, around this. Pluto is your source of power and transformation. So this also sort of provides an element of having the power to be able to make changes, the changes in your life that you want to make, and not necessarily just settling for what you have to do, if that makes sense. I mean, we all have to take care of our responsibilities, of course. That is a very important thing. But we can't necessarily ignore our own development either. And this is where Neptune comes in, because Neptune, this is a little triangle, and Neptune's really the top of the triangle here. Neptune's focus is all on your long-term goals, and is this whole concept is sort of opening up to show you that you had goals. And while you have to take care of your responsibilities, it doesn't mean that you put your goals on the back burner either. So there, all these planets are sort of coming together to bring some motivation back into your long-term goals, some creativity back into your long-term goals. And in many cases is also bringing this influence of power or change into those long-term goals as well. And Pluto is very much focused on relationships right now in Aquarius, which is a little bit we'll just say that a lot of times Aquarians do have trouble with relationships because they can have the tendency to have a hard time emotionally connecting to other people. However, this is brilliant for you, really, because we're not looking for emotional connection. You're Geminis, not that you don't need it, okay? But in this particular sense, we're not looking for an emotional connection. We're looking to connect with people who can help us move forward in our goals, period. So actually, this is the perfect influence for you to use, and that, of course, trine will last all week long. The grand sextile will break up a little bit, but all week long, Venus is still going to be in this trine with Pluto. So this very powerful planet in this very powerful space of being right on the cusp of Aquarius and Capricorn is a fantastic energy. You're talking big ideas, you're talking the motivation to get it done, you're talking your creative juices flowing. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Cancer. We continue to have Mars in Cancer, and we continue to have Mars focus on our inner closet or our trauma space, for lack of a better way of saying that. Although Cancer's influence is very much on self. So we're looking at how we can improve ourselves by the release of our inner anger around specific traumas that we have had, from the past. What's interesting about triggers is that triggers hit roots, and depending on how deep that root goes, as far as how long the individual has sustained this particular trauma, healing always happens in layers, and it really is like an onion. The first layers of trauma hurt, but they don't hurt as deep as the next layer and the next layer. When you get to that really meaty part in the middle of the onion, we're talking some seriously deep roots that have been in there for a really long time. And you have to peel away the layers of the different emotions that surround that particular root. Yes, it is a lot of work. And yes, when it happens, it feels like the end of the world. It really does. Honestly, I've done so much of my own inner child work over the years that a lot of people think, okay, once I get over this, I can just move on and everything is perfect, right? No, actually, it takes a lifetime to become the way that you are, be programmed the way that you are. It's probably going to take the rest of your life to unprogram yourself. And it is very difficult and very challenging when these things come up, unfortunately. We continue to have Mars in a trine with Saturn, and Saturn is focused on finances right now. So this is sort of giving us a reason why we're going through this trauma. And we do have a Mercury retrograde coming up. In fact, we're entering the shadow period of that retrograde, pardon me, at the end of this week. And Mercury is very much all about finances as well. So I really feel that some of this trauma that we are getting rid of, some of this anger that we're getting rid of, is coming up around childhood issues with money, or your younger self's issues with money, specific things that come up that basically give you a programming about money, and that programming is getting in the way of you being able to change your financial situation. It's a lot to think about. And when I was first broached with the thought of my childhood experience is actually having an effect on whether or not I can make money now, I didn't believe it at first, and then realized that it's absolutely true. As I did my own journey, I could see just where some of these money mindsets were coming from, whether they're coming from mindsets of your family. There's a issue where people are always fighting because there's no money. You have to deal with somebody who takes money or even takes your money. I mean, there's actually a million things that can happen that would influence us, our financial mindset in childhood. And when you understand this and you really focus on the root and you release a lot of that anger and frustration towards that, and trust me, you're going to find more anger when you find this root. It frees you up to look at your finances in a completely different way. And that really is what the Mercury retrograde is all about. That's what it's teaching us all this time. So Saturn is just basically reminding you, you are responsible for any of your financial lessons, and sort of daring you to go through your process, understand where that comes from, and then dares you to make better choices with your money situation. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Sounds like it's really heavy and it's a lot, but I know you guys can get through this. And once you get to the other side and you take power and you take responsibility for your finances, there's an element of freedom in there, if that makes sense. And I am going to move on to Leo. We are focused on the past this week. We are going to start off the week with the Lilith or dark moon in your sign. By the end of the week, she moves back out of your sign, and we have pretty much not a whole lot to influence the sign after that, which is actually not really the worst thing in the world when you think about it. The Lilith or dark moon is all about change, making drastic changes, and she's focused on the past. And this is kind of a difficulty because, you really can't change the past. We've heard that a million times. It's, you can't change what happened, even if it happened 30 seconds ago. You can't take it back. So the only thing that you can do in this situation is change the way you view the past, if that makes sense. And yes, that is absolutely easier said than done. And in many cases takes a lot of work. You can't just sit there and go, okay, I've been traumatized my whole life, but I'm going to look at it as something else. And that fixes the problem. If only it really was that easy. And yet it is that easy at the same time, just to add another little layer of confusion to the whole mix. It is a very frustrating process. And you can not go through it if you want. You can absolutely not go through the healing process. But staying where you are doesn't really work either. So I feel like what's happening really for you guys this week is these situations come up that mimic these past experiences, that create these triggers, that juggle these roots in your own emotional healing in order for you to see what your lesson is in that, to accept your responsibility in those instances, and to help you to release control over wanting to change the past, because unfortunately you just can't. And if you get an apology, that doesn't fix anything either. Trust me on that. Okay. I've had two abusers in my life. I got an apology from one and it didn't matter. It didn't take the roots away. It didn't make the situation go away. Did I feel a little bit happier that I got the apology? Okay, maybe. Um, but there's still so many layers to that abuse that I still haven't worked through. And it's something that happened 30 years ago. An apology or even an acknowledgement seems like it's going to make everything okay, but really in the end it doesn't change what happened. And if you still hold anger inside of you because of it, that anger is still hurting you, not the people around you. So think about it that way. It might actually help you through your process. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Virgo. Focus is on your logic, your mental state, how you think. We continue to have Ceres in your sign, and she moves backwards. So, oh no, she's in retrograde actually in your sign all week long. So again, we're looking at those maternal and nurturing influences, and it's focused on how you think. Really, really strange, huh? Well, this isn't about, obviously, we're talking retrograde, so it's mirrored back at us. This isn't about whether or not you're nurturing people around you. This is actually about taking a look at your thoughts and where your thought process might need to be nurtured a little bit. And while that sounds a little weird, and I've had a million clients go, I think the way I think, and there's nothing I can do about that. I have no control over that. Yes, you do. You absolutely have control over that if you choose to believe that you have control over that. That is exactly how that works. I know Virgos are very prone to overanalyzing and overthinking. And while in many cases, the control around that is that if I overanalyze and overthink it, I won't miss anything. But the truth is, the overanalyzation and the overthinking is what's causing you to miss things when you think about it. And you know it's true. You may not want to admit it, but you absolutely do know that it is true. It influences everything. And when you get too stuck in your head, you start to freak out. And then before you know it, exactly what you were afraid of happening is happening. It's almost like, in a way, you brought it on, or your brain is preparing you for this event so that you can prepare yourself to get through this event. It really is all in how you look at it. Is your thoughts to yourself and the situations around you nurturing? That's the question that you want to ask yourself. If you're nurturing your mind, that does include learning and keeping it sharp for as well. if you're nurturing your mind and your thoughts towards yourself in these situations are nurturing, then you don't have to overplan and overthink and overanalyze because you've got it. You're on top of it and you're not getting in your own way. And that really is what it comes down to. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Libra. We have nothing to influence Libra this week. No planets, no secondary influences. It just is what it is. Focus is on the home this week. And I can take this two ways. And I'm just going to share both ways with you because this is what I'm picking up around this. One, that you have a bit too much time to focus on your home, and that can be frustrating. But at the same time, we always have projects and we always have things that we have been putting off for a really long time, and having that extra space, even if it's not where you want to focus your energy currently right now, it is a good outlet for that energy because it does help you feel at the end of the day like, even though you were stuck at home all day, you got something done. It was kind of like the pandemic. I mean, so many projects that have been put off for a really long time in my house got done because we were stuck at home and looking for something to do, kind of a thing. I'm not quite talking about another pandemic. In fact, I don't see that ever happening again. I just don't think that the world could survive that. But what I do see is, cancel plans coming up, or things that were supposed to happen maybe not happening, and you have to kind of put that frustration somewhere, and why not be creative with it? The other thing that we'll say, the other side of that teeter-totter, is that you have so many projects at home that need to be addressed and taken care of, and you just haven't had time to do that. And that actually can get in the way of what you're currently focused on very easily, because instead of focusing on what you need to get done now, you're also focused on all the million other things that need to get done as well. So two things about that. One, the more you have on your mind, the less you're focused on what you're doing. And if you're not focused on what you're doing, mistakes can be made, accidents can happen. It's just not good. So even if you can't get to those projects right now, they don't have to be swimming around in your head while you're focused on something else. That's the first thing. The other thing I feel is time itself. A lot of people, and I use it myself, I'm so guilty of talking about how I don't have time, I don't have time. And one of the things that I've noticed about that is the more I say it, the less time I have. We actually do have piles and piles and piles of time. I have piles and piles and piles of time, regardless of how much I say I don't have time. Managing that time is everything. So sometimes I have learned that I can motivate myself outside of the house like nobody's business. But as soon as I get home and I have to focus on what I need to get done at home, it's very hard to motivate myself to get off that couch, to get off my phone, to step away from the television and get it done. And that's really what you need to focus on this week if you want to get those things done, or you need to get those things done. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Scorpio. We have no planets in Scorpio this week. In fact, the moon is literally just left your sign. We might have still a little bit of an influence of that on at the very, very beginning of the week, the very early parts of the day. And we're talking very early, depending on where you are in the world. For those of us on the west coast of the United States, the moon will probably be gone by the time we wake up. For those of you on the east coast, you may have to deal with it for a few hours before it actually officially moves on, maybe into midday or so. Focus is on those you love. And there's a couple of things. First of all, as the moon moves out of your sign, it is in a T-square with Venus as well as Saturn. And now Saturn is very much focused on your responsibilities to your long-term goals. Venus is focused on your support system. So how much support are you really getting towards those long-term goals? The moon's focus is on those you love. And this creates that challenge of the people that you support all the time don't seem to be supportive of what you need to get done right now. Two things about this. First and foremost, that can very easily turn into an excuse as to why you can't get things done, because nobody else can fall in line and be there to support you or do what you need them to do to support you. And when you have situations that can very easily become excuses, you are saying that because of the actions of another person, you can't get it done. And what you're actually doing is you're taking your power and you're putting it in somebody else's hands and saying, okay, you have the power for me to be successful, so I need you to use it. That's never a good idea, ever. That's never a good idea. The truth of the matter is, and this is what I have learned a lot, the people in my household, my family, they can be very supportive in their own ways. I mean, I have had an office at home for years, even when my kids were little. They understood for the most part when mom's on the phone, she can't be disturbed. My husband has always been very supportive and done a lot of things for me in terms of a lot of the stuff that I have, he created, to be honest with you. And that's wonderful. Now, and then I found myself in positions to where I don't go out and do live events because I can't guarantee that one of my family members is going to be there to help me. And it's been a very good excuse. And I've put the power in their hands for a long time and therefore haven't done it. It is a market for me to make more money. And I'm saying I can't do it because my son's not available to help me out, or whatever the excuse is. The bottom line is that doesn't help me at all. And it's not helping you if you're doing it. So if you need support, number one, you need support, look for it elsewhere. Number two, if you can't find it anywhere, sometimes this is a lesson for you and you alone. And there are plenty of lessons out there that require us to not have support. It is a very, we'll just put it this way, people wouldn't understand because it's not their lesson, it's yours. So keep that in mind. As we move out of that mess, though, things calm way down, and no planets to influence Scorpio, not even any secondary planets are influencing Scorpio. And this creates a completely different focus where you can enjoy those you love rather than look at them as somebody that might be holding you back. And actually, when I release what I feel is their responsibility in my business, it opens up to a much better relationship for all of us when you think about it. So keep that in mind as well. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Sagittarius, where all the action is happening right at the beginning of the week as we move into, the moon moves into Sagittarius pretty early on Sunday morning. And as the moon moves into Sagittarius, it moves into a T-square with Venus, which is focused on your support system and is all about creativity and love as well. And then we have Saturn pointing towards your responsibility to your long-term goals. Now, I'm thinking of a particular Sagittarian that I know and love, and she knows exactly who she is when I say that as well, because this is one of those very typical scenarios where you're not getting the support from your family to do specific things for yourself, and that becomes the excuse as to why you're not doing it. And in some of these cases, it has to do with health, it has to do with diet, it has to do with your own success, what have you. We've all been in those situations multiple times. The issue is if you don't get out of that situation, nothing ever gets done. You don't meet your goals. You're not responsible to yourself. Yes, we all are responsible to other people from time to time. And yes, it would be awesome if those other people would automatically be responsible to us every time as when we felt we needed that. But that's not realistic, especially with all the multitude of things that the people around you are going through, as well as the multitude of things that you're going through. So I kind of feel like this is going to create one of those situations where you have the conversation, you know what you need to do, the person can't help you that day. Today, you get to choose, am I going to do it anyways because this is what's best for me and what I need to do? Or are you going to use them as an excuse? And I'm looking at you, as we move into Monday, things are completely different. It's like night and day. The moon continues to influence you, but moves into a trine with the sun and Jupiter that are pretty much in conjunction with each other. Now, the moon's focus now is on your day-to-day schedule, right on the cusp of those you love and your day-to-day schedule. And the sun and Jupiter are focused on your career. Now, this is all about expansion of your career. This is about where you shine. This is about where you kick ass. It's almost like an emotional release that suddenly blossoms into new opportunities, if that makes sense. And it's really important in many ways to allow this to happen. It does seem there are times, I mean, it's weird to say that, okay? But a lot of times when you're faced with an opportunity that is great, you get freaked out and then you come up with a million excuses why you can't do it. We're going to try and avoid that today as much as possible, especially because there isn't a lot of influence in there, and just focus on the good. How can I grow? How can I get better at what I'm doing? That's human evolution. That's what we're all here for and what we're supposed to be doing. As the moon leaves Sagittarius and moves into an opposition with Mars, Mars is very much focused on inner trauma. So we're talking about the release of inner anger here. So it's like we go from all right, sorry about that. We're gonna restart the video here. Stupid computer. Okay. So we literally are starting out with challenge, and then everything is great, and then boom, we get into another challenge. And this is a deep one, right? Because we're talking about your inner anger and making time to give yourself that space to release that inner anger as well. The more we hold on to it, the more we wind up spewing it out on everybody else, the more we wind up hurting ourselves, the more it physically hurts us because it's in there and it's burning a hole in you, whether you choose to believe that it is or not. It is burning a hole in you somehow. So no one really wants to take the time to do this, but everybody needs to take the time to do this, if that makes sense. And this opposition at some point in the day is a T-square as we add Neptune into that. Neptune is also focused on your long-term goals. So we know what we're pointing at again. This is you releasing all of the anger and all of the frustration and all of the things inside of you that are keeping you from getting your shit done. Plain and simple. I cannot explain it any clearer than that. As the moon moves out of your sign, we continue to be focused on your day-to-day schedule. You've gotten through all of this emotional ruckus, all this craziness has taken place, and now you can focus on all the awesome things you're going to accomplish and moving forward in your goals. The easiest way to do this is to get out of our own way, plain and simple. Nobody gets in our way more so than we do. And we can come up with a million people that we think are doing it, but it all comes down to us. It all comes down to you and what you're willing to do. And you get some fantastic energy. Put that into your own greatness today, right now, this week. That is your focus. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I am going to move on to Capricorn. The moon not kicks off on Tuesday. The moon moves into Capricorn, right into an opposition, and in some cases later on a T-square with Mars as well as Neptune. So this is a little bit of a challenge when the moon is focused on your day-to-day schedule. So this is going to create one of those little wrenches in your schedule and disrupt your perfectly laid out plans. Neptune's focus really is on your long-term goals. So this is really where this disruption is going to happen. And Mars is focused on inner trauma, still focused on inner trauma. We've been spending a lot of time releasing old anger and old issues and old traumas. And while that is not pleasant, and while a lot of times we don't have time for that, if you don't make time for that, you continue to get held back by the same patterns that you've created. And that is not the Capricorn way. Capricorns don't like to be held back by anything at all. And while it's not necessarily the Capricorn way to really focus on their inner healing to get past that, I kind of feel that in some cases, Capricorns actually understand the value of this more so than any other sign, because Capricorns never want to see anything in front of them that's gonna hold them back. So I feel like this moon coming in at this time, creating this anger that's triggering old anger, give yourself the space to work through that a little bit, understand it, accept it, put it in its place, release it, move on from it. You don't want it holding you back, period. As we move into Wednesday, that opposition continues, and we also move into a square with Neptune, as well as, no, that's not a square, the Sun and Jupiter. So the Sun and Jupiter are very much in conjunction with each other, focused on career. So we're talking about expansion, we're talking about where you shine right now. As this anger is coming up, obviously this is one of those classic cases that you don't want this anger to react in the wrong place, right? Especially if the frustration is coming up in the workplace. And one of the big problems with triggers is that we tend to emotionally react to them. So when something hurts the most, our emotional reaction is generally the meanest or the harshest. And in the workplace, that's not going to work out very well for you. So you do want to manage that as much as you possibly can. The moon is in a trine with Uranus and Mercury. Both planets are almost in conjunction with each other. They're getting pretty close. And these planets are focused on your support system. So you're not in this alone. And Capricorns are not ones to really ask for help, but this is one of those prime opportunities where you should be asking for help, just to make sure that you're dealing with the situation in the correct way. As we move into Thursday, the moon moves into conjunction with Pluto, which is right there on the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. So it is still very much an influence. We do continue with that square with the sun and Jupiter, but we also continue with that trine. Actually, our trine has moved to a trine with Venus, and Venus, again, is all about your support system. So this is a challenge that's going to last you a few days, but you do have multitudes of different support to get you through this particular challenge. I also feel like there may be a bit of a communication challenge between you and another individual in all this. So you want to be prepared for that. And as difficult as it can be sometimes, it may be necessary for you to change the way you communicate with this individual to be able to solve the problem, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move into Aquarius, where focus is on finances and relationships, as Pluto continues to be in Aquarius, is still focused on relationships. And the moon is going to bring some interesting stuff into that as we close out the week with the moon in Aquarius, as a matter of fact. So we're going to start with Thursday as the moon moves into conjunction with Pluto, which joins Pluto's trine with Pluto's trine with Venus. So sorry about that. Venus is all about your support system. Pluto, and in this case, the moon, are focused on relationships right now. This actually brings you to this support within the relationships that you currently have, or being able to find the creative support that you need within the relationships that you have. Basically, you have all the resources you need to do whatever it is that you want to do, especially get past challenges that are caused when the moon and Pluto are in a square with the sun and Jupiter, and the sun and Jupiter are focused on your career. So we all get these blocks. We all go through these challenges where there are certain things going on in our lives that are frustrating, and we're so focused on the frustration, we're not focused on how to get out of the situation, specifically around, and I'm saying this to myself, I've been going through this a lot, specifically around the choices of others, whether they affect you personally or not. This is a really hard pill for me to swallow, that I have absolutely no control or say over the choices that somebody in my life is making that are directly affecting, I almost said offending, because they are affecting me. This is really a hard pill to swallow. It's like one of those giant horse pills that you could barely fit in your throat and you're trying to swallow it. It's really, really tough. But I also learned recently through my own process that I don't deserve to have an opinion over what this person is doing, whether I believe that it's the right thing or not. What I have control over is how much of that am I willing to deal with? How much of that am I willing to give my energy to? How much of that am I willing to waste my energy on? I could be making changes for me instead of worrying about what somebody else is doing. So a lot of that really does have to do with that. And Pluto is also very important here, because Pluto is your sense of power. And again, if we're focused on what other people are doing instead of ourselves, that is a gross misuse of power. It's also a gross or a situation that completely quenches your power, and you don't want that either. As we move into Friday, the moon moves into a square with Mercury and Uranus for just a moment. So luckily, it's a very small one. The moon's focus is on your relationship with money, as it's right there on the cusp between relationships and money. And we have Mercury and Uranus focused on your support system. So this is actually very interesting for me personally also, because my relationship with money, it has nothing to do with other people. Period. Have I been trying to make it somebody else's problem a lot? Absolutely, yes, I have. But it's not, it's mine. It's my responsibility. And this is what I need to do for me. I need to take care of me, period. And I really feel that this has everything to do with what this square is saying. It's saying to again, we're taking ourselves out of other people and what they're doing, and we're putting the ball back in our court. We're taking back our power and saying, I'm taking control of this situation. And the only way I can take control over my financial situation is to make sure that my relationship with my money is healthy. And that is a really big deal. As we end the week and enter into the shadow period of the Taurus Mercury retrograde that is coming up. The shadow period starts actually right at the end of the week on Saturday. The moon moves into a trine with Mars. Mars is in a very interesting spot, still focused on inner trauma, and it's Mars. So we're talking about anger and the release of anger issues. What's interesting about this is the moon is still focused on finances. And in some cases, that house also rules growth, birth and death, change, different things like that. Basically, it is the release of anger and emotional trauma around financial issues, financial mindsets. So it's not a comfortable thing to go through. I have actually been through something similar here, probably when the moon was in Aquarius a few weeks ago. But it's necessary. And after the fact, once that it was done, I could see the value in going through it, even though I fought it tooth and nail the whole time, because I really didn't want to let go of my preconceived ideas of how it was supposed to be and why it's not the way that it's supposed to be. And in all honesty, those preconceived ideas didn't fix the problem. Getting that out of my way so I can focus on fixing the problem, that is what I need to do. And when we get veered off the path, the moon comes in and creates an emotional situation that brings us back to where we need to be, especially when we're moving into a Mercury retrograde. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we're moving into Pisces. We continue to have Saturn in Pisces. We continue to have Neptune in Pisces. Neptune continues to be in a sextile with Pluto, which is right on the cusp of Aquarius and Capricorn currently, and focused on relationships. And Neptune is focused on your long-term goals. This is actually very interesting for you guys right now, for a couple of different reasons. One, Pluto is your source of power and pointing to your relationships as being your source of power. So it's also kind of sort of telling you that you have all the people that you need in order to achieve the goals that you currently have right now. And I feel like for Pisces, a lot of times they get into a very deep emotional place. When you get into that place, it sort of feels like you're fighting this alone, and you almost don't see all the people and all the support that you do have around you. So Neptune lining up with Pluto is sort of opening the doors for you so you can see. I mean, you're a very social person. You have contacts everywhere. So you probably have contacts in the places that you really, really need them, if that makes sense. Saturn is pointing at your responsibility towards your finances this week. And there's a couple of interesting things going on with that. First of all, Saturn's square with Venus. Venus is all about love. She's very feminine. She's all about creativity. And she is pointed at your support system. Sometimes you're looking for support in terms of taking care of your financial responsibilities and just not finding it. And that's really what this square this week is all about. It's almost like, if I were to look at it or visualize it, it's a man that's standing there and saying, these responsibilities are very, very heavy on me. I'm looking to my partner to help me. And the partner is just not doing it for whatever reason. And that can be really, really frustrating, especially in this day and age where, it is hard to have a one income household these days, unfortunately. So there's a couple of ways that you can handle that. One, obviously talking about it, not fighting about it, and preferably as unemotionally as possible so that there doesn't become a fight. You don't want to use words, accusatory words, or words that put somebody in a defense mode, because that is usually when the argument starts. So you want to avoid those forms of communication, and keep in mind that as we end the week, we are moving into the shadow period of the Mercury retrograde. So these communication issues are right there, ready to come in and cause a problem anyways. Mind what you say and the words that you say. And also, what I find is really important is you want to communicate. If something is very deep emotionally for you, you want them to feel what you're saying. You don't want them to understand what you're saying. When somebody feels what you're saying, it's getting in there. When people understand what you're saying, it gives them, especially people who tend to do this a lot, it gives them, opens the door for them to basically change what you said to fit towards themselves, or it just gives them a defense for whatever it is that you say, which of course leads to that argument. The good news is that Saturn is in a trine with Mars. Mars is actually in a very interesting place as it continues to be focused on inner trauma. So we're talking about, in many cases, the release of old anger patterns around finances. So old mindsets around finances. This can take the form of childhood memories of the household and how finances were dealt with. This can take the form of mindsets that were sort of learned incorrectly, whether they were taught to us by others or it was just something that we came up with in our minds as children. That actually is a thing too. It seems like releasing your inner anger over your trauma is not a pleasant thing, but at the same time, that trauma has to be released and that anger has to be released in order for you to see the value of the lesson and how your mindset needs to change in order to be successful and in order to fully take on your responsibility for these financial needs. So seems a little bit much, but when you think about it, this is a perfect time to do it. We're heading into a Mercury retrograde. Mercury rules communication, yes, but also has a lot to do with finances. So if you're having issues with your finances, Mercury's retrograde is going to kind of sort of provide different ways to help you identify those patterns so that you can eliminate those patterns. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that's what I have for everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Check out my website, heavymetalpsychic.com. There is all kinds of really cool stuff that is continuously going into that website. including the very first book that I've ever written in my entire life is actually the Amazon store should be going up. But if you don't want to wait until it's on the website, you don't have to. Just go on to Amazon Kindle, look up my name, Melissa Bruce, or the Heavy Metal Psychic, and you should be able to find my author page with my very first book, mini book, Kindle book on the Mercury retrograde. And specifically what that is, it is the first book in a series of retrograde. So we're going to explain every single planet retrograde in all of these books. Again, I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, everybody.